Imagine a big party full of music, laughter, bright lights, and big promises about a green future where the air is clean, the cities are quiet, and energy feels almost magical. In the middle of this party stands Italy, listening while Germany speaks with huge confidence, waving charts and bold plans, shutting down nuclear power, covering the land with wind turbines and solar panels, promising to lead the entire world. Politicians clap, activists cheer, cameras flash, and anyone who doubts the plan looks like the enemy. But Italy does not cheer. Italy watches quietly, with a strange mix of respect and worry, because Italy understands something simple from history. Lights do not stay on because someone gives a speech. Hospitals do not run because a slogan sounds good. And factories do not survive because leaders believe. They survive because energy is real, steady, and always there, every second, day and night. In the room, the conversation feels less like careful planning and more like fashion, like a trend everyone wants to wear, even if it doesn't fit. Italy feels uneasy, not angry, not jealous. Just thoughtful. This doesn't look like engineering. It looks like wishful thinking dressed as bravery. Italy remembers old projects that took time, skill, and humility. Dams, bridges, railways, power stations built with math, patience, and respect for limits. Back then, decisions were heavy because they carried consequences. Now everything feels light. Big dates, big promises, quick laws, confident speeches. But behind the confidence, reality begins to push back. Electric bills rise. Factories feel pressure. Families start worrying about what they can afford. Questions appear, but people are afraid to ask them out loud, because every question sounds like you hate the planet. Still, the cracks are there. Promises slowly turn into bans. Bans turn into costs. Costs fall on normal people, not on the politicians who made the decisions. And Italy watches, the way you watch a friend walk straight toward a cliff, while smiling, convinced everything will work out. There is nostalgia, but not for the past itself, for seriousness, for honesty, for leaders who checked the numbers twice before acting. Italy whispers to itself, we should be careful, we should think before we jump, because collapse doesn't always come with explosions. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in higher bills, in lost jobs, in closed factories, in cold rooms, in the quiet fear that life is slowly getting harder while everyone keeps pretending things are on track. That is where the story begins. Not with rage, but with concern, and with one important question that hangs in the air like a cold wind nobody wants to feel. What happens when good intentions meet bad planning, and pride makes it impossible to turn back? After watching the bright party promises and feeling that quiet unease, we need to go back in time, because to understand why Italy sees danger where others see glory, you have to understand the story of the Lira and the strange comfort it brought. For many years, Italy had a secret trick. Whenever the economy slowed, whenever factories struggled, whenever politicians made mistakes they did not want to admit, they could simply devalue the currency. It was like pressing a hidden button. Overnight, Italian products became cheaper for the rest of the world. Shoes, machines, tiles, clothes, food, suddenly they looked like bargains. Exports rose, orders arrived, and everyone said, see, the system works. And for a while, it really felt like magic. Businesses stayed alive, jobs returned. Workers believed that somehow, even with chaos in politics, things would sort themselves out. But this magic had a price, and it was slowly hiding in every corner of daily life. When the lira was pushed down, everything from abroad became more expensive. Fuel, technology, raw materials, medicines. Prices went up. Then wages went up to chase those prices. Then prices went up again to chase those wages. It became a spinning wheel that never stopped. People were not becoming richer. They were just running faster to stay in the same place. Families felt it in the supermarket, at the gas station, in rent, in every small purchase. And yet, strangely, the country began to depend on this trick as if it were a drug. Whenever trouble came, instead of fixing deep problems, corruption, slow courts, messy bureaucracy, bad planning, leaders reached for the same old medicine. Devalue, 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 devalue. Relief came quickly, like a warm wave, and everyone forgot the pain for a while. But after each dose, the body was weaker. The addiction metaphor fits perfectly. The first time feels helpful, the second time feels necessary, the third time becomes a habit, and soon nobody knows how to live without it. Workers demanded wage indexation, automatic raises tied to inflation, not because they were greedy, but because they were scared of being eaten alive by rising prices. Companies raised prices preemptively because they were scared too. The whole system learned to expect inflation, and once expectations change, they begin to drive reality. You didn't ask, "Oh, will things get more expensive?" You asked, "How fast?" Still, to many politicians, it looked like control. "See," they said, "but we can always rescue ourselves." But it wasn't rescue, it was delay. It was pushing the volcano further down the road. And then something changed. Europe began building a new idea, a shared currency, shared rules, shared discipline, no more printing your way out, no more easy devaluation. The euro was like locking the medicine cabinet. For some countries, that was fine. For Italy, it was like waking up after years of using the same drug and realizing the pain had been waiting patiently. Suddenly, mistakes were visible. If productivity was low, you saw it. If the state was inefficient, you felt it. If politics avoided responsibility, there was no cushion left to soften the blow. Factories that once relied on cheap currency had to compete honestly, using efficiency, innovation, and discipline, not currency tricks, and many were not ready. Life became harder, growth slowed. People blamed the euro, and in a way they were right, but only partly. The euro did not create the weakness, it exposed it. Think of a broken leg healed badly with bandages instead of surgery. The bandage is taken away, and only then you see the bone set in the wrong place. That is why Italy watches big promises about energy, climate, and grand plans with a different eye. Italy has lived through a period where e-solutions felt easy, comforting, and politically popular, but secretly built deeper danger under the floor. Italy remembers how leaders said, "Trust us, we know what we're doing," and how citizens clapped because the pain disappeared. For a moment, Italy remembers how, years later, the bill arrived all at once. So when another country stands up and says, "We will transform everything, and there is nothing to fear," Italy feels the echo of the old Lira drug. The promise of painless change, the belief that laws can override reality, the temptation to think you can avoid trade-offs simply by being bold enough to wait. But reality always waits. Inflation is not emotional. Physics is not emotional. Energy systems, like currencies, obey rules that speeches cannot rewrite. The lesson is not that change is impossible. The lesson is that shortcuts are dangerous and comfort can become a trap. Italy learned this in the slow grind of inflation, in endless negotiations about wages, in the quiet frustration of ordinary people losing purchasing power year after year. The Lira worked in the same way painkillers work. When the real problem is internal bleeding, they make you feel better while the danger grows. And when the painkillers stopped, the truth stood there cold and clear, demanding real reform. A memory shapes how Italy looks at the world now, suspicious of miracle cures, cautious of grand experiments, alert to the difference between appearance and substance. Because once you've lived through addiction, you can recognize the look in someone else's eyes, that mix of confidence and denial, and you know how the story ends if nobody is brave enough to say, "Stop, let's face the problem honestly." When the Lira drug was taken away and the easy trick stopped working, something else became painfully clear. Italy had grown older without really growing up. For years, the numbers looked fine on paper, but underneath, productivity had quietly stopped moving. It was like a Peter Pan economy, charming, creative, full of small family stories, but refusing to become an adult. Across the country, thousands and thousands of businesses lived in a strange comfort zone, especially tiny firms with fewer than 15 employees. That number matters because once you go above it, new rules, unions, paperwork, and obligations appear like walls. So many owners simply stayed below the line on purpose. They did not hire the 16th worker, even if they needed one. They preferred staying small, surviving, instead of growing, staying safe instead of daring. From outside, it looked romantic. Small workshops, family shops, local factories where grandparents, parents, and children worked together. Inside, it also meant no real investment, no research, no testing of new ideas, no hunger to compete with the world. The company was not a machine to build the future. It was a living room passed down like an heirloom. This created entire dynasties of tiny firms that never died, but never really evolved. The goal was not to innovate. The goal was simply not to collapse. And when that mindset spreads across a country, something invisible happens. Productivity stops rising. Machines stay old. Computers stay outdated. Modern skills never arrive. Young people enter these businesses and feel like they have walked into the past. Promotions depend less on talent and more on family, loyalty, and time served. Why risk testing a new product when the old one still sells well enough? Why automate if your cousin needs a job? Slowly, quietly, the rest of the world moves forward while you stand still. For a long time, devaluation hid this truth. The cheap currency made Italian products look affordable, even if they weren't improving. But once that trick disappeared, the spotlight turned on, and everyone could see the stage props. Big companies in Germany and France were spending on robots, labs, software, logistics. Italy, in many regions, was still using methods from decades earlier. Not because Italians are lazy, far from it, but because the system rewarded staying small, staying informal, staying safe, and fear lurked everywhere. Grow too big, and the state notices you. Try something bold, and the courts may take years to solve disputes. Fail once, and society never forgets. So many entrepreneurs choose comfort instead of courage. That is the Peter Pan economy. Beautiful, creative, full of charm, but forever refusing adulthood. And when the euro arrived, when markets opened wider, when competition sharpened, Italy discovered that charm alone cannot win battles. Without higher productivity, wages cannot grow honestly. Without innovation, young workers feel trapped. Without scale, businesses cannot survive shocks. The problem wasn't dramatic like a crash. It was slow, almost gentle, like sand slowly filling a room. Each small firm had its reasons. Each family had its fears. But together they built a country that struggled to step into the modern world. And this is why Italy looks at big promises with suspicion. Italy knows how easy it is to live inside a story. We are fine. Our way is special, while the world quietly passes you by. The Peter Pan dream feels safe, but sooner or later the bill arrives, and you realize that staying small, avoiding risk, and avoiding change comes with its own terrible cost. While the country was still laughing at weddings, still gathering for long meals on Sunday, still proud of family, an unexpected truth was forming. Fewer and fewer children were being born. At first, nobody panicked. People joked about us more families and modern choices. Grandparents said, "Our kids will have an easier life than we did." But slowly, the shape of the country began to tilt. Classrooms that once overflowed had empty desks. Playgrounds became quiet. Villages that once echoed with running feet and loud voices started to feel like museums. Italy had one of the lowest birth rates in the world, not because people stopped loving children, but because life stopped making space for them. Young couples looked at their future and saw unstable jobs, small apartments, high living costs, and barely any support. They were told to study longer, chase careers, pay higher taxes, help elderly parents, and somehow still start families. Many waited, many said maybe next year, and soon next year became never. As birth rates dropped, the age pyramid flipped. Instead of many young people supporting a smaller number of elderly, the opposite happened. Every year, more people retired and lived longer, which is a blessing, but there were fewer workers beneath them to carry the cost. The pension system, once simple and generous, began to strain. Governments promised they could keep paying everyone, but the numbers kept tightening. To keep the promise, taxes rose. When taxes rose, young workers felt squeezed. When they felt squeezed, they delayed children even more. A quiet loop formed. Not dramatic, not sudden, but powerful, like a tide that never stops. Behind these numbers were real lives. Young families asked, how can we have a baby when daycare is expensive, when rent eats half our salary, when one emergency can break us? Women faced pressure from both sides. To build a career and to be a perfect mother, with little help from the system. Many had to choose one. Meanwhile, towns filled with elderly people, kind, gentle, full of memories, but tired. Streets slowed, shops closed. Schools turned into offices or empty buildings. An entire generation carried the emotional weight of feeling like the last ones, as if the music was fading and nobody was coming to dance after them. And yet, this wasn't just sad. It was logic. In an economy where growth faltered, where jobs felt temporary, where houses were hard to afford, having children felt risky. So people acted rationally for their own lives, but together those choices created a national problem. The demographic spiral fed every other weakness. Fewer workers meant less innovation meant slower growth meant fewer opportunities for the young, and fewer opportunities meant fewer children. If the Lira years were like a drug, something that covered the pain, the demographic shift was the part of the story where the body grows weaker over time. No loud crash, no sudden disaster, just a world that grew older 1 year at a time, while politicians argued and promised solutions. And in living rooms across Italy, grandparents held one grandchild, not 5, and quietly wondered what the country would look like when that child grew up, and whether there would be enough hands to build, to care, to pay, to dream. This was not just economics, it was identity. It was the feeling of a country slowly forgetting how to replace itself, as if tomorrow kept shrinking while yesterday kept growing larger. Italy's slow decline wasn't only about money, or demographics, or fading factories. There was another monster quietly wrapping itself around everyday life: paperwork. Imagine you want to open a small cafe on a quiet street with 4 tables, good coffee, and maybe a few pastries. In many countries, you fill out a couple of forms, pay a small fee, pass a basic inspection, and you are in business. In Italy, the same dream can turn into a maze. First, you talk to the local municipality, then the regional office, then a health inspector, then zoning, then heritage protection if the building is old, and most buildings in Italy are. Each office sends you to another office. Each form needs another stamp. Each signature requires yet another appointment. Time passes. Rent keeps ticking. Savings evaporate. And before a single croissant hits the counter, many people simply give up. This is what investors, entrepreneurs, and even normal families face. A system built layer on layer over decades, with courts that move slowly, rules that overlap, and permits that can take months or years instead of weeks. No villain sits in a dark room deciding to ruin people's plans. Instead, tiny rules accumulate like dust. Safety rules added on top of tax rules, added on top of environmental rules, added on top of historical preservation rules, until they become a heavy blanket over the whole economy. Courts were meant to protect fairness, but delays mean justice often arrives too late. A contract dispute can drag on so long that even winning feels like losing, because by the time the decision comes, the company is gone, the opportunity is gone, the energy is gone, the energy is gone. Big companies sometimes survive these delays because they can hire lawyers, consultants, and accountants to navigate the maze. Small businesses cannot. So when foreign investors compare 2 countries, one where you can start building next month, another where you might still be waiting for permission a year later, they quietly choose the first and move on. And it is not only business creation that suffers. Even simple renovations can feel like a battle. Want to add solar panels to your roof? There might be an architectural rule. Want to expand your shop by 2 meters? Someone will ask for an additional survey. Every small step invites another document, another signature, another delay. Over time, people learn a dangerous lesson. It's safer not to try. The economy loses something invisible: ambition. Young people decide to leave, not because they hate Italy, but because they want a place where yes comes faster than a maybe later. Meanwhile, politicians promise reform, but reforms themselves have to pass through the same slow system they are trying to fix, So new laws get added to old laws, instead of replacing them, making the problem heavier. And this bureaucratic inferno feeds a quiet emotion: fatigue. Business owners feel tired, workers feel stuck, citizens feel watched but not supported. Italy still has beauty, talent, design, food, art, but when everything must fight through courts, permits, and paperwork, the nation moves like a beautiful ship, dragging enormous anchors. That is why so many companies choose to avoid Italy, not because Italians lack skill, but because time has become too expensive there. In the end, bureaucracy becomes a hidden tax on hope, and every year that passes without real simplification makes the fire burn a little hotter. Imagine you're a young Italian, fresh out of university. You studied engineering in Milan or physics in Rome. You spent years mastering your craft, paying tuition that was heavily subsidized by the Italian state, attending some of the best universities in Europe. The government has invested tens of thousands of euros in your education, trained you to become productive, creative, and ready to contribute to the economy. You're eager to start your career, maybe launch a startup, maybe change the world. Then you look around and realize there's no real place for you to shine. Welcome to the world of brain drain, or, as Italians call it, fuga di cervelli, the flight of the brains. Italy, despite its brilliant universities and educated youth, is slowly exporting its most valuable resource, its people. Over the last decade alone, roughly 1 million Italians, mostly young and highly educated, have left the country. That's like taking the brightest lights of Rome, Milan, Naples and Florence, packing them onto planes and sending them to Berlin, London or Dublin. And why do they leave? The reasons are simple: pay, opportunity and respect for merit. Picture two scenarios side by side. On one side, you have Giulia, a 25-year-old software engineer in Milan. She's competent, ambitious, and hardworking. She joins a local startup, but the company is tiny, the processes are outdated, and promotions are based not on talent, but on seniority or family connections. Her boss's cousin runs the team she's on, and despite her skills, she waits years for a chance to lead a project. She earns about euros 400 a month, enough for a cramped apartment in the suburbs, maybe a Vespa, and instant stress. Now flip the screen. You see Giulia in Berlin, doing the same job in a modern tech company. She's now earning euros 3,500 a month, working with talented peers and promoted based on merit. She rents a modern flat, enjoys public transport, and her ideas are valued. Within a week, she has more freedom, independence, and dignity than she ever had in Italy. The choice is obvious. She leaves, and Giulia's story isn't unique. The exodus is massive, and it's tragic for Italy. Me. Every student the country trains, every degree subsidized, every skill nurtured leaves with a one-way ticket to a more welcoming economy. Italy invests in these diamonds and receives in return sand. Talent leaves, innovation leaves, startups vanish, and political engagement weakens. The country's future is literally flying out of its airports. Why is this happening? Part of the reason is Italy's feudal corporate culture. Meritocracy, rewarding talent, innovation, and performance, is often seen as a threat. Promotions are determined by age, connections, or even family lineage, not by results. If you're talented but new, you wait your turn for years. Ambitious young Italians see this system and realize that no matter how brilliant they are, they'll always be blocked by an invisible ceiling. Compare that to Germany, the UK, or the Netherlands, where talent is rewarded fast, and it's not surprising that many Italians pack their bags. The consequences of this brain drain are enormous. First, the Italian economy loses its most productive workers. These are the people who could start new companies, develop new technologies, or push traditional businesses to compete globally. Without them, Italy's productivity stagnates even further. The very people who could reverse decades of economic inertia are gone. Second, Italy loses political engagement among the young. Many of these emigrants leave frustrated with bureaucracy, corruption, and slow-moving institutions. They take their energy, ideas, and activism with them. Instead of lobbying for reform, running for office, or creating change at home, they build their lives abroad. What's left behind is a population skewed older, more conservative, and less dynamic, a perfect recipe for stagnation. Third, it creates a vicious cycle. With fewer young, skilled workers at home, businesses struggle to find talent, wages stagnate, productivity falls, and the incentives for the remaining youth to stay disappear. Italy ends up losing even more young people, reinforcing the demographic. And there's also a subtle, ironic twist. Italy is exporting diamonds and importing sand. It trains brilliant engineers, doctors, and scientists who leave, while the economy increasingly relies on low-skilled labor or temporary workers. The country pays for talent and loses the return on investment while struggling to fill skilled positions. Some Italian cities have started to feel the emptiness. Vibrant neighborhoods are quiet, startups are underdeveloped, and innovation hubs are moving abroad. Italy, a nation famous for creativity and genius, from Leonardo da Vinci to Enrico Fermi, is now watching its brightest minds build the future somewhere else. Yet, this is not an irreversible fate. Stories exist of returnees who bring back experience, networks, and capital. Policies could incentivize young Italians to stay, reduce bureaucratic barriers, and reward merit over seniority. But for now, the brain drain is real, painful, and directly linked to the country's economic stagnation. In short, the brain drain is Italy's silent hemorrhage. The country trains talent, loses it, and continues to watch its economic potential slip away. Every young Italian who leaves takes with them the ability to innovate, to grow businesses, and to shape a modern Italy. Without reversing this trend, Italy's future is not just aging, it's emptying. Italy is a country of incredible beauty, from the canals of Venice to the rolling hills of Tuscany. But if you look closely, you'll see it's a country divided not just by culture or history, but by wealth and opportunity. Welcome to the North-South divide, a tale of two Italys. Imagine looking at Italy from space at night. The North, Milan, Turin, Venice, is a blaze of light, bustling with factories, offices, and high-speed trains. The streets are alive with economic activity, innovation, and commerce. Now scan south, Naples, Calabria, Sicily. The lights grow sparse. The roads are narrower, the factories almost invisible, and economic life seems slower, quieter. It's as if the country is glowing on one side while slowly dimming on the other. In the north, cities hum with industry and international business. Lombardy, Piedmont, and Veneto produce goods that are exported around the world. Cars, machinery, fashion, and technology. If northern Italy were its own country, it would rank among the richest in Europe, competing with Germany's Bavaria or Switzerland. Companies are efficient, infrastructure is modern, and investment flows freely. Now head south. The contrast is staggering. GDP per capita in southern regions is roughly half of the. This isn't a small gap like New York versus Alabama. It's the difference between Germany and Tunisia existing inside the same borders. The south struggles with poor infrastructure, weak private sector, and chronic unemployment. Roads that should take an hour may take 3. Highways promised for decades, like the Salerno-Reggio Calabria Highway, became national jokes because they took over 50 years to complete. Trucks carrying goods get stuck, logistics companies can't operate efficiently, and businesses struggle to compete even within Italy. Then there's the mafia factor. Organized crime in Sicily, Calabria, and Campania isn't just a Hollywood story, it's a real economic parasite. Small businesses are forced to pay protection money, the pizzo, to operate. Refuse, and threats follow. Pay and profitability drops, onwards. Foreign investors see these regions and think twice. Why risk building a factory in Naples if every truckload has a shadow tax? The mafia doesn't just take money, it kills trust, stifles entrepreneurship, and scares away innovation. And the state, trying to compensate for the weak private sector, becomes the largest employer in southern towns. Forest rangers, municipal clerks, administrators, jobs are handed out not based on skill, but on political loyalty. This creates a clientelist system where employment is tied to who you know rather than what you can do. People survive, but the economy doesn't grow. Ambition is stifled, innovation is rare, and the North resents the burden of subsidies sent to support the South. This tension fuels political instability. The Northern League and other regional parties argue that the industrious North is being held back by a corrupt, inefficient South. At one extreme, the League once suggested cutting the South loose entirely until it could become self-sufficient. The debate isn't just political, it's existential for Italy's economy. The country is running on one leg, and you can't win a race hopping on one leg. Historically, this divide has deep roots. After Italy's unification in 1861, the South was marginalized, poorly industrialized, and politically neglected. Decades of state intervention promised development, but often failed due to corruption, inefficiency, and organized crime. Meanwhile, the North industrialized quickly, built international trade links, and became Italy's engine of growth. Over time, this structural inequality became self-reinforcing. Rich regions grow richer, poor regions lag behind, and national cohesion weakens. The consequences are visible in everyday life. Young southern Italians often migrate north for work or abroad entirely, feeding both the demographic crisis and the brain drain we discussed earlier. Universities in the south produce graduates who quickly leave because local opportunities are scarce. Families are split, local economies shrink, and communities age faster than the national average. Cultural treasures remain, but the economic vitality is gone. Yet, it's not all doomed. There are pockets of hope. Tech hubs in Naples, agribusiness innovation in Sicily, and tourism-driven entrepreneurship. Some regions are slowly modernizing roads, ports, and digital infrastructure. But these are exceptions, not the rule, and scaling them to make the South a true economic engine requires decades of sustained investment, political will, and cultural change. Italy's economy isn't just struggling, it's chained, and the heaviest chain of all is its national debt. As of 2025, Italy owes roughly euros 2.9 trillion, a number so enormous it's hard to imagine. To put it in human terms, every man, woman and child, from a newborn in Naples to a centenarian in Sicily, carries an invisible debt of around euros 48,000. This is the weight hanging over every decision, every reform, every dream of economic revival. Debt in itself isn't automatically a disaster. Many countries borrow to invest, to modernize, to grow. But Italy's debt is a trap. It's a combination of size, interest obligations, and slow growth that makes it nearly impossible to escape. Every year, Italy spends euros 80–90 billion just on interest payments. That's not paying down the principal, the actual borrowed money. It's simply rent on past borrowing. Imagine paying rent forever on a house you'll never own. That's Italy's economy today. Money that could be used to improve schools, build highways, modernize courts, or fund startups is disappearing into the void of bond markets. This massive debt also leaves Italy extremely vulnerable to market panic. Investors are constantly judging how risky Italian bonds are compared to safer alternatives like German bonds. The difference in interest rates, called the spread, is a signal of confidence or fear. If the market gets nervous about a political scandal, a war in Europe, or a pandemic, investors sell Italian bonds. The spread spikes. Suddenly, the interest Italy has to pay rises, and servicing the debt becomes even harder. It's a high-wire act without a safety net. The 2011 debt crisis showed just how dangerous this can be. Italy teetered on the brink of default, and the Eurozone itself nearly collapsed. The European Central Bank had to step in with the famous "whatever it takes" speech to calm markets and prevent disaster. But unlike Greece, which was small enough for the EU to bail out, Italy is too big to fail and too big to save easily. A default by Italy wouldn't just hurt Italians, it could shatter the euro, destabilize Europe, and trigger a financial meltdown on a continental scale. The country is essentially living on borrowed time, dependent on the hope that the next crisis won't push it over the edge. Debt also magnifies every other problem Italy faces. Remember the productivity flatline, the demographic crisis, the bureaucracy and regional divides. Italy can't fix these issues because it simply doesn't have the money. Investment in infrastructure, technology, and education is constrained. The government can't lower taxes or incentivize businesses without risking higher deficits. Every reform requires courage, but courage is expensive when the state's pockets are empty. Politically, debt acts like a straitjacket. Decisions about pensions, healthcare, or public salaries are dictated not by long-term planning, but by immediate fiscal necessity. Italy spends nearly 17% of its GDP on pensions, a number that would be impossible to sustain if borrowing costs rise further. Policies become reactive rather than proactive. The government prioritizes keeping the financial markets calm over investing in growth. The focus is survival, not progress. Debt also discourages innovation. Young entrepreneurs face higher taxes, limited funding, and a government too busy managing fiscal survival to support startups. International investors hesitate not because Italy lacks potential, but because a country with this much debt moves slowly, unpredictably, and at the mercy of the bond market. It's a trap. Growth is needed to pay off debt, but the debt itself prevents the growth needed to escape it. The situation is like running on a treadmill while carrying a backpack filled with bricks. You keep moving, but no matter how fast you run, the backpack never gets light. Every step forward, building a factory, hiring workers, investing in technology, is slowed by interest obligations and market scrutiny. And the treadmill isn't slowing down. Interest continues to accrue, the population ages, and the economy stagnates. Italy is a country of paradoxes. It has ruins older than most nations, yet still produces some of the most advanced cars, fashion, and machinery in the world. Its culture, food, and lifestyle are admired globally, and the Made in Italy brand remains one of the most valuable exports. Yet beneath this glittering surface lies a country struggling with deep economic, demographic, and structural problems. Despite decades of stagnation, Italy has resources that many would envy. Private wealth is enormous. Italians are famously good savers. The country is a global powerhouse in tourism, luxury goods, and cultural influence. Italian creativity, craftsmanship, and entrepreneurship still exist, but they are trapped in a system that doesn't reward risk, innovation, or scale. The challenge is enormous. Italy needs a revolution, but not a violent one. It's a cultural, institutional, and economic transformation that requires breaking old habits. The country must shift power to the young, letting merit replace seniority. Bureaucracy must be simplified, digitalized, and made predictable so businesses can operate without fear of red tape. Microfirms that dominate the economy should be encouraged to grow into global champions, rather than remain artificially small to avoid labour thresholds. The South must be transformed from a dependency zone into a land of opportunity, with infrastructure, investment, and governance that support entrepreneurship instead of stifling it. The obstacles are not small. Politicians face enormous pressure from voters, many of whom are elderly and resistant to change. Painful reforms often mean short-term political costs, while the benefits, more dynamic growth, innovation, and competitiveness, take years to materialize. But the alternative is far worse: slow decline, where Italy becomes a museum of its past achievements rather than a participant in the global economy. Italy has faced incredible challenges before. After World War II, it rose from ashes to become an industrial powerhouse in just 20 years. Today, it faces a different kind of challenge, one built on internal weakness rather than external destruction. The country still has the talent, the culture, and the ingenuity to overcome its problems. What it lacks is the political courage and institutional reform needed to unlock its potential. The choice Italy faces is clear: either embrace change, modernize, and adapt to the demands of the 21st century, or drift into irrelevance. Every day that passes without reform, every young Italian who leaves, every inefficient firm that remains small, is a step closer to a slow economic slide. But Italy is nothing if not resilient. If it can awaken from its decades-long stagnation, it can transform its unique strengths into a future that is not just surviving, but thriving. It's a high-stakes game, with culture, economy, and generations on the line. The clock has been ticking for 20 years, and the alarm has been ringing. The question is whether Italy will answer, or continue to hope the party never ends, even as the lights slowly dim.